Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. And this week, I have the opportunity to finally speak with my special guest at Maxwell Ivey, who I've been following on social media for a while, and we've been trying to get this episode together for quite some time too. So, welcome to the show, Max.
Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your patience and understanding and persistence.
That's okay.
And just for the benefit of your audience, it was all my fault that it's taken this long. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna.
Well, there's no reason to disagree with me. It's the
Nope.
truth.
Right. Right. Okay. So since you just got started, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Right. I am a totally blind man. I grew up in a family of carnival owners here in East Texas. And all I ever wanted to do was to be part of the family business, which I was lucky enough to do for about 15 years at one stretch. I also knew that eventually I would lose most, if not all, of my vision to retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. But I grew up in a family of people who were positive minded, who did things. So through their encouragement and the help of teachers, scoutmasters, and other people I met along the way, I've graduated from a traditional high school and college. I'm one of the few blind Eagle Scouts, and I did help run the family business for about 15 years before my dad's death caused it to go out of business. We just weren't really ready to run it without him at that point. And so I needed to figure out something else to do. So I started helping people sell used carnival rides on the internet, which that was one of the few things I felt like I knew a little bit about. Unfortunately, I had to learn a whole bunch of new things in order to do that, including how to hand code HTML. And people were impressed by the way I ran the website, how I took on difficult challenges. And they asked me if I would share more about being an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. And so that eventually led to me as the blindblogger.net, where, I've written 4 books. I've traveled the country solo. I've spoken at national conferences, sung in public. I now have my own podcast called What's Your Excuse? And recently started a network to help other people with disabilities launch their own podcasts.
Wow, that's amazing. So what inspired? Okay, you just explained how you got the name The Blind Blogger. So what inspired you to start the What's Your Excuse show?
Well, it really started as a challenge and then also a mistake on my part. I was doing lots of podcast interviews to promote the Midway Marketplace and then eventually to promote the Blind Blogger. And people's hosts started saying, Max, when are you going to have your own podcast? You're a good storyteller. You'd probably be great at it. And so I found a way out. I said, look, I have to be in the moment. I have to feel like I'm really paying attention to the other person. So I just don't see how I could do the tech and have a conversation at the same time. So if I find somebody who will take care of the technology, so all I have to do is show up and talk to people, I'll do it. Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because next thing I know, Frederick Bai from Montreal, Canada shows up. They said, hey, Max, I hear you're looking for a co-host and a producer. Let's go. So it was originally called Leading You Out of the Darkness. Then it was called No Excuses. Eventually it came to be called What's Your Excuse, which is a good fit because lots of people say if Max can do it, then what's my excuse? And so we just, kind of turned it the other direction. But yeah, it started like a lot of things I've done. It started because somebody I like and trust dared me to do it,
Oh boy, that's that wasn't a dare, but that's kind of how I got started in the podcasting world. I got encouraged to do that by a friend of mine. So
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's the way it is. We have to, people ask me all the time about, making friends and building a community online, because there are a lot of people who still don't think you can make, real connections with people you don't meet in person. But, I met this woman, Adriana Smith, about 7 years ago now. And at that time, she was known as the blog commenting superstar. And she took me under her wing and taught me everything I know about relationship building online, relationship marketing, marketing through commenting, whether that be blogs or podcasts. And she was the one who saw so much more in me than I saw in myself and encouraged me. She was the one who finally convinced me that my story was compelling and that I was actually doing other people a disservice by not sharing more about how I do things and, where this all comes from and how I get to that next step. She finally explained it to me. She said, Max, there are lots of people who don't have a built-in excuse that's obvious that keeps them from going after their goals, but yet they sleepwalk through their days and they don't really take any action. She said, you have a built-in excuse if you decided you wanted to sit on the couch and watch TV or listen to your TV and eat junk food. Nobody'd say the first word about it. So that's why you're compelling. That's why you need to get yourself out there more. But if it weren't for her, if it wasn't for other great people that I've met along the line who challenged me either directly or dared me or joked with me to the point where they made me think about, well, maybe that would be a good thing to try at least just once. So I hope that, especially for authors, because while before COVID, people had physical isolation, I think for authors, a lot of times we deal with emotional isolationism. And so I really think that authors have to build those connections and really take the limitations off that you can't make connections with people that you meet online. So yeah, I've been challenged more than a few times, but recently I got made fun of by some good friends because I told them, no, I wasn't going to do something.
You know what? I'm going to tell you, and some of my listeners and viewers know this because I've said this before, but I tell myself I can't do something, and I'm a Christian. This is a Christian-based podcast, so I'm going to say this. God tells me I can and shows me that I can. So I tell myself I can't do something, I wind up doing it. Or I get challenged to do something and I wind up doing it. Like, for example, my poetry. I thought for years that I couldn't write poetry. Well, I got a poetry book and so many poems on the blog to show it. So yeah.
Hey, I have a good friend from my church. Last summer, I love to sing, but sometimes I find a song that I like, but there's parts of it that I don't like or don't think would be appropriate for me to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So I took this song called Better Together by Luke Combs last summer, and I changed the chorus from like good old boys and beer, like a match made up in heaven, like good old boys and beer, to like the chorus has things that are pairs that are go good together. So I changed it to like s'mores around the campfire or cotton candy at the county fair.
Ah, there you go.
And I recorded myself singing it that way. And she heard it. She's like, Max, I think you could write a song or a whole song all by yourself. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. Ain't no way. She said, how did you write a book? How did you start your podcast? I said, well, the way I did it is I did a little bit of it at a time. I did something that I did know how to do and then went from there. She said, you just wrote half a chorus. Now all you have to do is write a full chorus. She said, think about writing a few words, a few lines, think about playing with some melodies in your head. She said, the next thing you know, and sure enough, 45 minutes after I actually sat down and started trying to work on a song, I came out with this song, which is called If You Don't Ask. And it's all about how I believe that if you don't ask, people cannot say yes. So, if we don't ask, people can't help us. If we don't ask, we don't open the doors to those angels that are meant to come find us. So, I mean, it's a really cool song. I wrote it in about 45 minutes. And it's like, now I had to let her tell me that she told me so. But yeah, it was one of those things. I was like, I can't do this. I've never done that. I mean,
yeah. And then you wind up doing it.
Even though there are lots of things in the last 14 years where I was like, no, Max, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or how the heck are you going to do that? And I did it anyway. So, it's just a reminder for people that are doubting themselves. Here, you're looking at two people who have accomplished a lot of things that they were not initially good at and had no plans to do. But we did them. But here's the important thing. Even somebody like me and Ann can forget about all the great stuff we did when it comes to that next challenge. So
yeah,
at those times, it's great to sit down and make a list of the things you've done in the past that were difficult and scary and dirty or messy or painful, but you did them anyway, and they were success. So, but isn't it funny how, we get to that moment where we're going to do something where we're going to, go off the top hill of the roller coaster, or for my friends who have done it, but I ain't going to do it, for people who have jumped out of the airplane. We forget about all those other times we faced difficult challenges and made it through.
Mm-hmm. But you got to keep pushing through, especially if it's something that God calls you to do, because if you don't, then you're going to regret it. You're going to live with the regret. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. Yeah, no. And us both being totally blind, we kind of have to do, it may take a while, and it may take, a lot of patience and prayer, but God gives us a way to do what he wants us to do.
Right. Well, I've decided God has not called me to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, swim with sharks, or whitewater raft the Grand Canyon. I've decided those aren't things that God has called and wants me to do. So
right. I've been whitewater rafting myself, but not off the Grand Canyon. Nope.
Yeah. I try to choose that scripture that says that he created us and we should respect his creation.
Exactly.
That's the way I look at it. But yeah, you're right. So often those difficult things are things we were called to do, we were intended to do, we were meant to do. And the fact that they're hard just makes them more valuable when we finish them and succeed.
Mm-hmm. Because you got to work for what you want. So what inspired you to become a writer?
Well, I had enjoyed writing in junior high school, but then they beat the joy out of me in high school and college. Because you go from writing stories or writing explanations to writing, research manuscripts, yeah. and that's not fun for anybody. I don't think it's even fun for the people who get paid to teach it. Those people who have PhDs in that particular stuff. So I had started the Midway Marketplace, and people told me that if I had a website, I needed to have a blog so that the website would be continually updated and be found in Google and all that good stuff. So I started with a blog on the Midway Marketplace, and I rediscovered my joy for writing and storytelling. And then from there, when I started The Blind Blogger, I continued blogging. And I think it was just after I started, it would have been in 2013, in like July or August, a woman invited me to be part of a virtual summit. But she said, Max, in order to do these summits, they always want you to have something you can give away or you can sell at a discount. So you need to have a what they call a lead magnet. And I said, well, I don't have anything. She said, I think you should write a book, and I think you could easily write the book in the next 45 days. And I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great on paper and in the air when you said it, but I'm not sure that can happen. And so her name was Eve Koivula, and she said, I'm going to share my favorite expression from Richard Branson. She said, he tells people to promise you will deliver and then figure out how. And when I stopped laughing at her, I said, that sounds great, but when this all blows up in our faces, I'm going to tell everybody it was your fault. So I start writing this book. I'm writing down my experiences going from a failed carnival owner to a blogger. This was before I was doing any podcasting. And I'm 3 weeks later, she gets a hold of me. She said, Max, there are 4 other women booked for this summit, and they've decided it would make more marketing sense to have it be all women. So you're out. And I said, look, I'm a carny kid. I grew up around, Ferris wheels and sawdust, and I've probably got the blood of Colonel Parker or Barnum or those kinds of people in me. So I understand what it is to want to put feet on the ground, butts in the seats, or faces behind the screen. So that's good, but I'm going to keep writing until I finish the book. And then I'm working on the book, and the book doesn't feel big enough, long enough, or important enough to me. And I'm sharing it with a few close friends. I hadn't shared it with our mutual friend, Lorraine, regularly at wordingwell.com yet, but I shared it with this woman out in California who was a coach, and she read it. She loved it. she said, Max, stop worrying about whether it's big enough or long enough. She said, it's a perfect size for me to carry it around in my purse. And then she said, oh, by the way, I didn't ask you permission, but I printed it out and highlighted a bunch of pieces of it. And I've been carrying it around in my purse. She said, stop worrying about, about whether or not it's long enough, big enough, or good enough. She said, just remember that you told the story you needed to tell. You included the exercises people need to have. She said, now, I know who your editor on your website is, so if you don't send this off to her, I'm going to send it to her for you. And, because Lorraine had helped fix a big problem on the Midway Marketplace site where the images were showing up in front of the text so that people were having trouble reading my blog posts. So, I had already started building a friendship with Lorraine, and she's, a wonderful woman. She's easy to become friends with,
Mm-hmm.
So this lady out in California, she threatened me. I said, okay, what the heck? I will send it off to Lorraine and see what Lorraine says, because she gets paid for this. And it took us several months, partly because I had never been through the editing process with a book before, partly because I was, short of money. And so instead of paying for the editing fees up front, we worked out a payment arrangement, which was something she doesn't do for anybody else. But she was really interested in my story and wanted to help me finish my first book. So in January 2014, the book was released. Even now, it still sells more copies than my other 3 books combined. And really, it legitimately all started as a dare. That's one of the few stories I tell like that that's actually 100% true. A woman said, I think you could do it. I told her no. She convinced me to try. And Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, A Blind Man's Inspirational Guide to Success, was released in January of 2014. So there again, you've got to have these people in your life who will say, you can do this, you should do this. If you ain't going to do it, I will take some steps to see that you do it,
Yep, you do. Because you got to have those people that push you, because if you don't, you're never going to get anywhere. Because you got to have you got to have people in your corner who know that you got the resources, the talent, whatever, to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I believe that you have to have 2 kinds of people, and sometimes they're the same person, but you've got to have 2 kinds of people in your corner. You've got to have the kind of person who will tell you that you're better than this, will tell you to work harder and do more when you're not. But you've also got to have the kind of person who will tell you that you're not as good as you think you are when you're over-believing your own publicity.
Well, that's true. That's true. And it takes like-minded people to do that, because if you talk to people who don't understand what you're doing, you might as well talk to a wall. I've experienced that myself.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite examples of that last part is the character Buzz Lightyear from the Toy Story movies. There was like a prototypical character of somebody who believed his own packaging, his own headlines, beyond what wasn't even anywhere close to what reality was in the start of that movie. So.
Wow.
Hello.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
I was waiting on you to finish.
Okay. That's one of the bad things about 2 blind people doing Zoom, is because half the time we don't know what Zoom is doing, because we're trying to eliminate as much of our computer screen reader noise as possible to make this an enjoyable listening experience for y'all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got that. I've got on earbuds, so I'm doing. I can hit control when my screen reader starts yapping at me. But I'm gonna be honest. And I'm gonna ask you another question. What's the most important thing you've ever learned?
I think the most important thing I've learned from this journey is that I am so much more capable than I ever thought I was. And when I get that question from hosts, if there's something you go back and tell your younger self, what would you tell them? I would tell them not to be so focused on one particular path in life, and to explore lots of other things, even if they're not things that you would have normally thought of trying. To expose yourself to more possibilities, to take more chances, and really just to go outside of yourself more. The most important thing that I have learned about people is that most people want to help others. Most people get a positive feeling from helping others, especially when they do something small for somebody who can do nothing for them but say thank you. And so what I have learned is that for those people who are afraid of building community, they're afraid of asking people for help, or they're afraid of asking people for opportunities. Excuse me. I've learned that when you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received from helping you. So
I love that. I love that. And I'll explain why I asked that question now. Because
sure.
I interviewed, and as you're hearing this, I will say last week, because I schedule them on Tuesdays. I interviewed a guy, his name is Clint Arthur. He wrote a book and he performed the audiobook. It's called Wisdom of the Men. And he said he's got a few women listed in the book, but every time he met a celebrity, and took a selfie with them, that's the question he asked. What's the most important thing you ever learned? And so he's inspired me to start doing that with my guests, because that's a very good question. So
yeah, unfortunately for me, there's more than one answer to that question.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's okay. It's difficult. It's difficult for people who like me, who have been around some awesome people in person and virtually, and have learned a lot of great things. Like I learned from Pat Flynn, never try to speak to an empty room, which basically means don't try to tell people stuff they don't want to hear. I learned from my experience as a coach that you can provide services you want to provide. You can create courses you want to provide. But the smart thing to do is to find what people want you to do for them and what they are willing to pay you to do, and to try to combine that with something that you are good at, that you enjoy doing, and that they will pay you to do, which is why I make connections and introduce people and get people booked on podcasts and get them submitted to magazines and stuff, instead of doing life coaching. So,
wow.
Another important lesson I've had to learn, and that's why I said that particular question is a difficult question.
Yeah, because you got it. You could tell stories all day about that. So tell me about your writing process. Did you outline your books, or did you just write straight from, as they say, the seat of your pants?
Now, come on, Ann. Have you ever? Do you know of anything we've talked about yet that I did with a plan?
I love it.
I mean, come on.
I asked all writers that question. So
yeah, I actually will tell my friends who write fiction that I feel like they are even the worst fiction writer is better than the best nonfiction writer, because even though you sometimes have to go through some personal pain to recreate what happened and to get it on paper, to have to make this stuff up and then have it all come together where it makes sense in some fictional location or universe, to me, that is just challenging. I don't think I could do fiction, and I know that I couldn't do fiction without an outline. However, I have a good friend named Adriana Gabazzoni. I don't know if I've introduced you to her yet or not.
No,
She's a fiction writer from Brazil, and she started off doing legal thrillers, and she's recently started doing some historical romances. But she likes to say that if a character starts to annoy her, she'll just kill them off. So she has a unique approach to fiction. She doesn't claim to know what's going to happen with the story. She is basically figuring the story out along with the characters, if I understand her correctly. So, and she speaks English, but I sometimes have trouble with English. Sometimes English is my second language, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, we can't words sometimes, as my daughter would say.
This is true. Yeah. But I believe the worst fiction author is better than the best nonfiction author, because for me, I can write most of this stuff while it's happening, or I can think back to events and try to honestly recreate them. The biggest problem I ever have is figuring out which tense of the verbs to use and whether to speak of something in the past or in the present or in the future, when may have written about the experiences while they were happening, but now I'm editing them a month or 6 months or a year later. If you ever get a chance to ask Lorraine, our friend, ask her how many times she wanted to throw the computer at me over the New York City book, over all the past, present, and future. And I mean, it just was like, Max. And oh, by the way, that book also, there was a problem with the letter E on my keyboard. So she also had to do a lot of just raw editing on top of trying to make everything make sense. But yeah, I was not her favorite person there for a while, even though I was still her favorite person, you know.
Oh boy. Yeah. And I'm getting into that. I've got a client. I've worked with her, one of her books, and the first round of edits was, oh my gosh, that was I can understand.
But back to your original question. Here's my process. I sit down and I open up a text document on my MacBook. I start writing, and I just keep typing until I'm through writing or through telling a particular story, or until I just get tired of pressing the keys. I don't edit. I don't think about editing. I don't spell check. I turn the spell checker off. I turn most of the notifications off. I don't want to hear anything. I just want to get in my mind, in my zone, and just type. And I've been using a typewriter. I first started using a typewriter in junior high school back when it was still a manual keyboard. And I've gone from that to regular electric typewriters, to computers, now even to smartphones somewhat. So I basically have figured out a way to do what all the great editors and writing coaches tell you to do. They tell you, just write it, don't edit it, don't filter it, don't censor it, don't think I shouldn't have said that until after you're through with that writing session. And then after you've written, a few hundred words or a few hundred pages, and you get to the editing process, then you can think about, okay, should I have said this? Should I have not said this? How does this make me look? And am I happy with that, with the way that makes me look? And you can worry about punctuation and grammar and spelling. And oh, by the way, is this sentence too long?
Starts in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Could you press pause for a second?
Hold on.
Because
all right, okay, so
yeah, so I do it freestyle in a text document from a keyboard. I have never become comfortable dictating my writing. I can dictate text messages and emails, but I cannot dictate my writing. It's a brain block. And like I say, that's what all the coaches will tell you to do is just to let it rip and not edit it, and either edit it yourself when you're through, or when you're through, send it off to somebody who gets paid to do that and is talented at it.
Mm-hmm. And you just gave a writing tip there. I was going to ask you if you had any tips and advice for folks, but you just gave one. If you have another one you want to share, let her rip.
Oh, I got a great one. So many writing coaches tell their people to set a timer and say you're going to write for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, or they tell them to block out hours on their calendar. Here's what has worked for me, and it's worked for a lot of people that I have become friends with over the years who are authors. So when you sit down, tell yourself you're going to write for 5 minutes or even 3 minutes. Then it's just such a small amount of time. And you may even want to use a note-taking app instead of opening up a laptop or a desktop. Make it as low impact as possible for yourself so that you can get started. Because what's going to happen is you're going to write for a lot more than 3 or 5 minutes you start. If you start, that's the problem. I have a friend who used to, he's a fitness coach. He says, most of the guys that can do 20 push-ups, there was a time they could do one. There was a time maybe lacing their shoes up was a big deal. So that's what I tell people is make what they call the bar to entry as low as possible. And once you get started, then things will go. One of my favorite stories about a writer is from Stephen King, and how he did some of his best writing in a house that didn't have heat, that didn't have electric light.
Oh.
He was just broke. And in his part of the country, no heat meant you were cold too. So, it's just the fact he was willing to sit down and write. And once he got writing, he just didn't stop, evidenced by the fact that I don't think he's ever written a book less than 1,000 pages. I could be wrong, but that would be my tip. And then, of course, find somebody you trust to be your editor, because very few people are talented enough to be the writer and the editor. And then also, once you've finished the manuscript, find people who know how to promote the manuscript. I'm good friends with Kat Lyon, and she showed me things about using press releases and submitting to author websites and submitting to review sites and awards and things like that I had no idea about. Plus, a lot of that stuff is just not accessible to a visually impaired person that's a writer.
Exactly.
Which is one of the real shames about the whole self-publishing thing. The self-publishing world should be like home to blind authors. I mean, it should be like one of the top 3 or 4 professions in the world for the visually impaired, except for the fact that I can't submit my own book to Amazon by myself. I can't. Maybe I could do my cover art, maybe not. But I mean, there's just so many places along the way where it's faster and easier and takes less hair pulling if you can see the screen instead of going by a screen reader.
Well, Max, let me back up for a second, and I'll tell you, I can't do my cover art and formatting by myself, but I have submitted my ebooks by myself, and I will get cited input on paper styles and stuff. But I've actually self-published, and I'm rebranding like 4 of my books, but I did self-publish those after working with print on these vanity presses or these print on demand publishers that charge you. Don't do that. Don't go there. But I couldn't.
Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. No. One of the things I like to make sure I tell people is every person that's visually impaired is different. We have different skill levels and different comfort levels. So I'm glad to hear that if I had that confidence, I could do it.
Yeah,
it's just one of those things that I have decided for Max, it's not a good investment of my time. But just like when people ask me about podcasting, and I tell them, hey, my podcast is not edited. I do it what's called recorded live. I said, but that doesn't mean. But I will also tell them, hey, there are lots of people out there in the world who are visually impaired, who are professionally trained, highly skilled, highly qualified sound engineers who could edit this thing until it, whistles Dixie, to use the old expression, if they wanted to. I'm just not one of those people. So, I try to help people to remember that even as visually impaired people, we are individuals, and even if we have the same vision loss and the same technology, we will have different levels of comfort of things we feel that we are good doing. That's so. I'm glad to hear that I could submit my books to Amazon if I wanted to. It's just not something I want to do. And
you know what, you do you do what works for you.
Exactly. Yes.
That is what I tell people. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm
good. I'm not going anywhere till noon, and that's to a dentist appointment. So I'm trying to distract myself at this point. But I did want to piggyback off of what you said about not paying vanity presses. I think it's an important thing to remind people of, because there are 3 types of publishing. There's traditional publishing, where you have to pitch them and get them to accept you, and then they print it, and they may or may not cover all the costs, depends on the company and your contract. And then you have the vanity presses, where you pay them, and you pay them a lot of money to get the book printed, but they may or may not be any better than you would have been doing it yourself as a completely self-published author. In a lot of cases, they aren't as good as you would have been, because they don't have the investment emotionally that you do.
Exactly.
And then there's the self-publishing, which is what me and Ann have done, which is where, you write it, you edit it, you format it, you submit it, you get the cover art, and you put it online completely by yourself. And that can be done completely free, but you're also open to hiring whatever people you feel like you need to hire during the process. But the thing I wanted to make sure of is very few people, in my opinion, are well served with the vanity publishing outfits. I'm sure there are a few people who have good stories, but I don't know them. And I wanted to go from that to talking about podcasting, because one of the things I do a lot of is going on people's shows and talking like we're talking today, or introducing hosts to my friends so that they can do the same. And I just want people to know, if a host says that they need you to pay them to come on your show, I would hardly ever do it.
No.
I am okay paying $20, $15 if somebody's asking me to make a donation and it's obvious from their website that they are not a professional company. I will do that if I feel like I should invest in that person. But there are so many great opportunities out here to share your story, to promote your brand, to tell people about your passion, where all you have to pay is the effort to find the show and send the email and show up and be yourself. So I strongly advise against paying to be on anyone's podcast or YouTube channel or live stream or conference or summit. I just would not ever do it. I have had cases where my clients have asked me if they should do it, and I always come back to them, is the investment worth it for what you feel like you're going to get out of it? And most cases, the answer is no. And then the other thing is, if you're doing this as an investment in the host, is it an amount you're comfortable with? Because, you know, there are people over the years who have invested in Max Ivey. And I like to say invest instead of sponsor, because a lot of people, my numbers would not justify them being a sponsor, but they may have invested some money through PayPal or whatever. So I occasionally will invest in another podcast host to go on their show, but I don't see it as a payment. So like I say, I would advise y'all never to do it. And in no circumstances would I ever pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to be on a podcast, mostly because it's just not worth it. But the other thing is, most people are just not ready. Their website isn't ready. Their social media isn't ready. Their content isn't ready to receive the benefit of going on a show where they would charge you thousands of dollars to be there.
Right. So where can people find you online, Max?
Right. They can find me at theblindblogger.net. They're welcome to write me an email at justask@theblindblogger.net. They can find my podcast and the other podcasts from the What's Your Excuse Network on wyexcuse.com. That's wyexcuse.com. And they can always find my podcast, which leads back to my website, by asking Alexa, Google, or Siri to play What's Your Excuse?
And of course, you're all over all the different platforms and social medias and stuff. So
more than I want to be, girl.
I know, right? I know. I'm on some that I barely even post on, but you know, you got to be out there.
Are you like me? Are you happy that Google went out of the social media business? Was that like a relief to you too, where you was like, that's one network I wasn't getting traction on anyway, so I'm glad I don't have that.
Yeah, I was on Google Plus, but I wasn't. Yeah, no. I'm kind of glad they disbanded, because I wasn't doing a lot with Google Plus. I'd been on it and kind of played around with it, but honestly,
yeah. See there, and just gave y'all a writing promotion tip. Only be on the social media networks where you feel like you're getting results for the time you're spending.
Exactly.
There's nothing says we have to be on every single one of them, which is why I'm not on TikTok.
I'm not either. And I've got my friend, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Jen Lowry, the Jen Lowry Writes podcast. She talks about TikTok a lot, and she's challenged me to get on there, but I'm not on there because, and I know there's blind people that are on there, but I don't feel like it's accessible for me. I don't feel like it's, you know, a place for me at this moment. And plus you can get addicted to it if you're not careful. I'm on Instagram, but I barely post on there.
I am on Instagram mainly for two reasons. One, I have a few clients, either as podcasters or as people who want publicity that are on Instagram. So I'm on there to support their work. The other thing is there are a lot of people out there who make it difficult for you to contact them directly. But if you connect with them on Instagram, they'll usually respond to their direct messages over there. So that's another reason why I'm on Instagram.
And voiceover now describes images and stuff, so I can, scroll through and read the text and the images, but I don't know how to share those. I really don't. I've seen
I,
send to, save. It's yeah.
I haven't figured that part out either. And the other thing that kept me off Instagram for a long time was that you could only really use it from a iOS device or from an Android device. And the other day, though, I clicked somebody's link to make sure I was adding the right link to a podcast episode. And I noticed that it seems like you can do more on Instagram now from your laptop or desktop than you used to be able to. So I may give it another try here beyond, like I say, just keeping up with the Joneses. I may give it another try to see, but I agree with you. It's hard to know. It would be great if we had somebody who could tell us, just simplify it down into like 3 or 4 or 5 steps as to how you share somebody's content. Because to me, these people that are creating this content, it's kind of meaningless if there isn't some easy way for their friends to tell their other friends about it.
Right. Now, what I do to post videos, and for those of you listeners who are visually impaired, or those who are sighted who want to try this and don't want to post videos on your phone, but you want to try something, I'll go on Zoom, I'll record the video, I will email the video to my phone, and I will share it on Instagram that way.
I thought I was the only one doing that.
Nope.
I did it. I used to do. I've done that with photos as well. I thought I was the only person doing that.
Nope. No. Well, actually, there's the Google Chrome extension that I use for posting photos up there.
Oh, I'm gonna have to find that.
It's there. Yeah.
Because I got a lot of photos on my laptop. There's no telling how much content that I have that people haven't seen before on Instagram.
Yeah, there's the Google Chrome extension. So, and it makes it, and it turns it into an app. So it's some parts of it are not accessible, but you can post photos up there. You can't post videos that way. It won't let you do that. But anyway.
Well, anyway, I've really enjoyed getting to spend some time with you. I think we've had a good time. I think we shared some information with people. I mean,
yeah, some really interesting. And I thank you for the tips that you've shared. And I do this, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I ask, especially because this is a Christian podcast, and if I know that there are Christians out there that are, are authors or business folks that happen to be Christian, do you have a Bible verse that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I'm not exactly 100% sure of the location, but it's one of my favorite. It's in Samuel. I think it's 2 Samuel, where God is talking to Samuel about David, and he says that man only sees with man's eyes, but God sees straight through to the heart. And I love that. That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorites because there are so many instances in the Bible where God used people who the rest of the world thought were useless, who the rest of the world thought were beyond redemption. He used prostitutes, he used lepers, he used the woman who couldn't stop with her menstrual bleeding. He used David, who was so small and so insignificant that not only did his own family not think he was worthy, Samuel didn't think he was worthy, So that's the kind of God that we have. And that's why that's one of my favorite passages in the Bible.
I love that. And if you don't feel comfortable, let me know. It's fine. But I feel led to ask you, would you like to close us out in prayer?
Yes, I will. But there's just one thing I have to mention at this point. Okay. I am a baptized Jehovah's Witness. So when I pray, I'm going to pray to Jehovah by means of Jesus Christ. So I hope that's okay with you and your listeners.
Okay.
It's not much different. It ain't going to hurt you.
Okay.
You're welcome to edit this out if you like. Okay. So our dear Father, Jehovah, we want to come to you and give you thanks for another day on this wonderful earth that you created. We want to thank you for the fact that you've given us life and another beautiful day here on earth. We want to thank you for sending your beloved Son, Jesus Christ, so that he could die for our sins and give us the opportunity to have everlasting life. We want to thank you for those people you have sent into our lives, those angels you have sent to pitch a tent around us, to protect us, to guide us, to encourage us, to support us when we couldn't support ourselves. We thank you for the angels. We ask that you pour out your Holy Spirit on our leaders so that they may hear your words and may make better decisions for the benefit of all of us. We ask that you continue to look after and protect those of us who have to go out into the world on a daily basis and face Satan and his wicked system. And we ask that you continue to forgive us of our sins when we fall short of your standards. And we leave these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'm going to follow that up. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Father, thank you for allowing me this time to speak to Max and to meet him and give him a place to share his wisdom and his story with the viewers and listeners, Lord. Protect us as we go about our way, Father. And may this be a blessing to those that are watching, those that are listening. And I thank you for the blessings that you bestowed upon us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much, Max. That was
Well,
awesome.
thank you so much, Ann.
And so we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story matters. Have a blessed day, everyone.